Hey friends, future recording Beo here. We just wrapped up the interview, and I think it's important to point out for this one in particular, there's a lot of spoilery stuff in this. If you haven't finished the campaign missions, we talk about those a little bit, a lot. We talk about a lot of revelations that you get in those. So if you're afraid of being spoiled, put this in the watch later tab. Watch it after you finish all 6 missions. But if you have, it's a good one. Hello, everyone. We got something that is very special here today. Generally, we talk to one person, but today we have two. We got Micky Neilson, who's a lead narrative director on the Stormgate project, and then I think y'all have met, but just for the sake of reintroducing once again, we got Tim Campbell, game director on the Stormgate project. So, Tim, before we get into all this conversation about narrative changes and the campaign and all this awesome stuff that is why we have you and Micky here today, it's now been about a week and a half since patch 040 came out. I think to pretty good feedback overall. So, Tim, before we get into this is your victory lap. How's the team doing?
The team is doing great. It's been really exciting to see the community response, to see the enthusiasm, higher player counts. That it's always a highlight of a game developer to see something that you've made get received well. So that's been very encouraging to the team. I would not call it a victory lap,
Hmm.
though. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We're very conscious of that, and we're working on even bigger and better things that we have in store. Our work is not done yet, and we are plowing ahead as quickly as we can. But it has been really encouraging, and I appreciate everyone who has been playing the game and sharing, well wishes and the feedback about it. It's been great to see.
So, a single victory pirouette, maybe, before we get back to
Yeah,
work.
maybe. Yeah, maybe a cartwheel, a victory cartwheel. There you
Ooh,
go.
I can't do cartwheels. I never learned that
Neither
one.
can I. That's yeah. You don't wanna see me try that.
So talking about the campaign, right? This was one of the big things in 04. We actually have a campaign that is more than just a technical concept, something that actually has story and is, well, a new and improved story. But it does feature pretty significant deviations from that technical concept that we talked about. Notably, the Vanguard, they're now from outer space. They came back in from the SDF Vanguard instead of this scrappy resistance that's happened. So, Micky, I'm going to start with you here, but how did that story evolve?
We've been talking with consultants off and on throughout the development process. And one of the things that came from a consultant who we spoke to fairly recently, which I thought was a great insight, it was a few things. A tonal shift was certainly one of the things that was discussed. But the other thing that was discussed was this whole shift with the story as far as the characters escaping Earth and then being able to come back 15 years later. And that I thought was a very smart move. And it's something that Tim and I talked about, and Tim Morton as well. And we looked at it and said, okay, well, what is this going to break? But what are the benefits that we get from it? And we felt that the benefits outweighed anything. The foundation of the story was able to remain, and pretty much everything that Jack Bentel wrote in the short stories still holds up with these changes. And so it was a really nice fit. And we can talk about specifics as to how we think it helped the story, but that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, we knew based off of community feedback, sorry, and kind of hearing from players back at early access, a lot of very specific things which we made sure to pay attention to and process, and then go through a phase where we kind of put everything back on the table in terms of the campaign, and were able to discuss what we wanted to do differently going forward. And it was, it's always a hard thing to take a developer who has built something and go back and look at redoing that. But to their credit, Micky and the others involved in the campaign were very enthusiastic about trying to improve the player experience, improve the narrative for everyone specifically. And that really allowed us to rethink maybe some of our early assumptions. And one of those assumptions that I think are not assumptions, but one of those elements that I think I personally had latched onto early on was the excitement around the idea of the post apocalypse and kind of seeing humanity that was on the upswing and who had already endured a lot. And I think that that framed the characters in a way that they had already experienced a lot before us as players and viewers kind of stepped into their story. And it didn't allow us to experience those things along with them. And so the desire to shift the timeline and to shift them into coming back from space to Earth was largely driven by a desire to let the players be alongside them as they experienced the horrors of what has happened to Earth. And I think pretty much every change beyond that really rippled out from that one central decision to allow players to experience things alongside the characters.
Gotcha. But I do want to go back to something that Mickey mentioned just earlier on, where he talked about how, okay, we're going to make them escape Earth. That's not really something that is in Beyond the Brink or Before the Brink, but in the ebooks that exist. We haven't really seen a lot of that in the stories. Are there plans to return to that time when we are like, okay, we're out of the Sigma 6 facility, we got to get off it, like how we got there and how we got back to was it the Outer Reach, the Outer Worlds, the separate colony?
Outer perimeter.
Outer
Yeah.
perimeter.
Yes, so there are plans to touch on that. I don't know what we're allowed to
Fair.
announce here. So Tim C, I'll leave it up to you if there's anything specific you want to add to this. But yes, we do have plans to visit that part of the storyline and specifically that time frame where the escape happened.
Yeah, Mickey likes to refer to it as kind of, you know, being a fan of Batman.
Hmm.
It's really important to have seen what happened to his parents, and what happened to him as a child, which led to him being Batman. And so, from my point of view, it's outside the scope of what we're doing for this first campaign. But I would really like to, and we've talked a bunch as a team about going back and setting some missions or some portion of a campaign back in those moments right after the Stormgate opened. One of the challenges for us with doing something like that as a dev team is that that's a big time gap from where we are today in the story, which means art assets, environments, the character models themselves have to be changed to reflect that because Amara obviously was in a very different age range when she was back then compared to where she is in the story. And same thing for the other characters. And so being able to create special assets just for that moment of time was not something that really was helping us to kind of advance the overall campaign, but it is something that we very much would like to circle back to at some point and be able to tell that original experience.
I gotcha. I mean, look, I'm a space nerd. I just want to hear about their space program. Like, that's what really matters here. But Tim, I do want to go back to what you were talking about, kind of the second part of that question, where you were talking about how you took all this community feedback, some pro, a lot of con earlier. Let's be real, and integrated that in and how things were changing. How many of the changes that we see in this new 6 mission campaign, obviously there'll be more, that are the result of a planned iteration? Hey, we have this now, but we want to go back and take a look at this. We want to evolve this versus direct pivots from what the community liked and didn't like.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And all of the feedback was super helpful. A lot of it was very negative, like you mentioned, but even that feedback was helpful to us. It might not have been pleasant to read or discuss as a group always, but we really did take stock of everything we could get out there in terms of video comments or Discord or Reddit or wherever it was. We would try to take and distill the feedback down into things that we might be able to improve and kind of put everything on the table. And we had our own thoughts, for as hard as the community was on us for the campaign quality at early access, which is fair game. You have to understand that we as a dev team are probably even more hard on ourselves about this stuff too. We knew that the underpinnings of where we wanted to go with the story, we were feeling really good about that, but the state at early access was not at the quality bar that we viewed as like the end goal. That was not the quality bar we were striving for. That was a starting point for us. And so we knew we were going to iterate, we knew we were going to change, and we knew we were going to head this direction. But the community feedback really did direct the detail details of what we did with this new re-release of the campaign. For example, hearing from people that we were introducing new characters at too fast of a rate and they weren't having enough time to connect with the characters before we killed them off or introduced the next one. You know, how much story we were pumping directly at players in the middle of a combat mission, for example, that just was blowing right past them and wasn't sinking in because they were busy building defenses and fighting off an attack at the same time. And so we really did try to modulate the interconnection between level design and narrative. That was the genesis of the hub missions. We tried to pull some of the narrative out of the combat missions, put it into a safe place that players could return to multiple times and experience at their own leisure, and really allow Mickey and you know the narrative team to put a lot more world building in than they would have been able to do in the combat missions. And so that's just one example, but a lot of that sort of expression of the changes was directly driven by, or you know, our reaction to community feedback.
Gotcha. And I believe you said even before EA that there was that you wanted to do some sort of hub. It just wasn't far enough forward. So looking at the feedback you got from the community in general, and I apologize in advance, I'm teeing right up on this just a little bit, but from all the feedback and everything else you got, Mickey, we'll start with you here. What was the best idea that you saw? You're like, wow, that's a really good idea. We should add that into our narrative design or mission design, whatever it is.
I don't know that there was one specific one
Mhm.
that comes to mind right away. I mean, the general feedback was what we really latched
Okay.
onto, and there were things that kind of, came to the surface. And for instance, Amara, just to touch on that really quickly, Amara and her likability was one of the biggest things that people talked about, and obviously, Amara's our main character, so we want people to like Amara, and we made a choice to kind of get into Amara's character arc when she was kind of far down the road of this vengeance arc with the early access. And so, really taking a hard look at that and saying, okay, we need to revisit Amara's entire arc and where we are in her arc when we join her. We didn't give people an opportunity to get to know her and to get to like her. And so I think that was one of the biggest takeaways that we all had and one of the major changes that we made.
Tim, was there anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I heard loud and clear from the community that they didn't want us to play it safe or follow a traditional formula that was close to that of previous games, right? I heard loud and clear that people wanted us to take some risks, to try to push harder on the campaign to make it a bit more of a unique Stormgate specific experience. And so that that hit home for me. It's something we're working on, I think, in all the different aspects of the game experience itself. But for campaign, that really emboldened me to pursue the hub, pursue the conversation system, pursue things that you wouldn't normally see in an RTS game like that, and then to also be pretty aggressive with our revisiting of the levels too. We shook up the order, we shook up the objectives, the layout of missions. We recast so many of our roles and re-recorded. Like we really tore it down to the studs and built it back up. And you could see like the recasting or refocusing the story to be a group returning from space to reclaim Earth. Um, that all of these things were really in fulfillment of that desire that I heard loud and clear from the community for us to chart our own course and to deliver a unique campaign experience. And that's what we're continuing to try to do as we work ahead into chapters 2 and 3. And I think you'll see some pretty more new and divergent things that we're doing in those missions.
Speaking of new and divergent things, Ryker is now blonde. How did we talked about? Oh, we got makes sense. We got Amara. We put her earlier on, but Ryker was this kind of gruff military guy with his dogs out in the middle of nowhere, and now he's a fashionista that is Stormgate's prettiest boy. Can you walk me through those changes, Mickey?
I think I remember a specific message from Alan Dilling where he used the example of Patrick Swayze and Point Break, and he had me hooked right there. So I said, "Chase it." That's that sounds fantastic. I'm very much a child of the '80s, so yeah, he was speaking my language.
Gotcha. Makes sense. But talking about, okay, so Ryker redesign, we've all this stuff. We actually talked a little bit about trying to break new ground and go in different ways. But this is this new IP. Mickey, I know you did a lot of work with StarCraft, everything else, but now in the last couple years, you've been in this process of developing this new IP and story. What is that process like?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And it's something I've been at, let's see, I think August will be 5 years that I've been at it with the Tims. And about the first year, I think, was phone calls, just getting onto conference calls, me and the Tims, and talking about what are we even like, what world are we in? What is our genre? What is the premise of this entire thing? And I wrote up, pitch after pitch, and we kind of looked at it and we just started narrowing down. We started really, really trying to zero in on what the concept was going to be. And, we talked to some other folks as well. And I think around that time we were talking to some consultants also. But we finally started, like, we got really excited about mechs versus demons. And it's like that initial cinematic, the very first one that we did, where it's this archaeologist out there and this demon shows up and then the mech comes in, like that really kind of captured the fantasy that we were going for, and what we were looking for, especially initially with this world. So that was something we were very excited about, and creating a new IP is a very challenging thing to do, and it's something that's kind of fascinating to me. And part of the reason, that I kind of went off on my own after Blizzard was to do that, was to create new IPs. And if you look at something, Tim brought up Batman, for instance, and that's one for like a major character that is absolutely fascinating, where you can take a character like that and you can have an Adam West Batman, and you can have a Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale Batman, and you can have the Saturday morning cartoon and the kindergarten books, and that's the only reason that works is because the foundation has been laid, because that IP has existed for as long as it has, and because it has a very firm foundation. So I feel like now finally we have set that foundation, and I feel like we have a very solid foundation with the franchise now.
Yeah, and going off of that, there's this common refrain. There are only 5 original stories. There's nothing new, just retold. Especially in this context of having worked on Mickey for You, StarCraft 2, and then Tim with the Command and Conquer franchise a little bit, with Warcraft, with StarCraft. How do you ensure that the stories you're telling are that different, fresh, impactful IP that is something that people aren't going to just say, well, I've already heard this before. Why would I want to pay attention to this again? I guess we'll start with you, Tim.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll talk a little bit about the
Hmm.
level design side, and then Mickey, I'll pass it to you, and you can maybe talk narratively on this. But I think building a new IP is incredibly fun for a developer. It's also incredibly challenging. And I have found it to be a messy process. I think Mickey was kind with his answer earlier, but having worked on this since the beginning, he has seen us really go through the process of making the sausage, so to speak. And it's not always a elegant or a clean process, but we have a lot of different developers with a lot of different passion ideas, and trying to synthesize all of that into an IP that we feel really strongly about as a company and as a dev team is probably the hardest part in my mind. It's one thing for Mickey to go off in a corner and write some cool setting, or me to go off in a corner and say, this is my idea of something that's exciting, but trying to get everybody together to envision the same sort of tone and feel for a new IP and be aligned around that is just a very difficult thing. Working on a sequel, you have a lot of that already done. The team already comes into it already understanding what universe they're building for, and that does a lot of the work for you. I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but developing a sequel is a very different set of challenges than building a new IP. And so this is an experience for me, in particular on the level design side, having worked on campaigns for a number of RTS games. um, there are similar to there's only 5 stories. There's similar a set of archetypes that are the foundations for missions. Is this an escort mission? Is this a holdout mission? Is this a base versus base mission? Is this an installation mission with no base building or anything, right? Like there's a set number, and it is very difficult for us on the level design side to really make fresh experiences within campaign missions. And so a lot of times we will dig into our toolboxes and maybe pull out things that we've seen in one way, shape, or form before, but then we try to spin it into a new light by virtue of, say, a new unit that's introduced, or a new hero or character that's introduced, or things along those lines. But um, it is a challenge that we work through, and a lot of it just comes down to trying to find the fun. So we gray box, we prototype, we get the levels put together to a functional state, so we can then adjust from there, make sure that we're happy with it, and then take that level further in the process to harden it all the way. And all along the time, poor Mickey is trying to keep adjusting the narrative to match whatever crazy ideas we're having on the level design side.
Yeah, and on the narrative side, when you're creating something and you want it to feel new and unique, I think where you have to go back to are the basics for storytelling. And what I always consider the pillars are character concept and theme. You have to have characters that people care about, because if nobody cares about the characters, then literally nothing else matters. And so if it's a concept that's been done, as long as you focus on the characters and the theme, I think you can create stories that are compelling and that resonate with people and hopefully feel unique, even if you are going down, territory that has been gone down before.
Gotcha. And did you say care about the characters and caring? I'm just yes, characters. That's my own brain just firing elsewhere. But
That's your new tagline, Mickey. You put the care in characters.
there we go, Mickey. I expect royalties on this if you use it. This
And you
is
get
Sounds good.
shirts made up.
there we go. But Tim, we talked about mission design, and this is a perfect segue into a question that I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer. But one of the cool things that StarCraft 2 did with their co-op setup was they took these missions in the StarCraft 2 campaign, and then they said, okay, well, with some modifications here, we can turn these into co-op missions. Are there any missions, and if so, what are they, that are in the current campaign that are kind of on that short list for Frost Giant to be able to do something similar?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we've talked a bunch about on the design side. And the answer in the short term with what we've put out right now is no. There's not anything that's going to directly turn into a cooperative scenario. Largely, that's because we're still in the first half of the campaign. This is where we're tutorializing things and ramping up players' understanding of the game and introducing new units. The back half of the campaign, when really, all kind of uh, you have full room to maneuver as a player. You have all the mechanics, you have all the units, you have all the tech tree. That's where we're going to see more fully featured, larger RTS missions that I think there are some in that we will see cooperative variants of. But it's something that we keep our eye on, and I think once we get to that point, there will be some from the campaign that do become cooperative in that way. We're also aiming to have a cooperative campaign, but um, that that feature we have prototyped internally. We have a direction that we know works and that we're really happy with, but it's in the queue dev wise behind Team Mayhem and relighting up co-op again.
Well, you just kind of stole my next question from me, but I do want to have a little bit of a follow up here because I look at these first missions. They're fun, they're new. I enjoyed going through them quite a bit, but I look at these and they felt very much like one player missions. They looked difficult to just, they didn't look like something you just kind of slot two people in and go to town. So, how are you all? In the prototyping stage, obviously it's not done yet, but going about designing these missions in such a way that they can be used played by 2 or 3 players at the same time.
Yeah, we in my mind I separate the first few missions from the rest of the
Okay.
campaign. Once you get to a certain size and a certain number of moving pieces in a level, I think it's a lot easier to look at it through the lens of, hey, how would 3 players play this? Oh, let's put down some more resource spots or expand the build space or give them some different things to do on the map. Um, and I see once we get there, I think those levels will largely be things that can support co-op without significant changes. We're not going to like diverge and make 2 versions of each map or anything like that. But in the earlier missions where you only have one or a couple of units, just a handful, and you're going through maybe some more scripted areas, those are the harder ones. And so in co-op, I expect that we would do some more changes to those levels in order to support that feature and have 3 players in them. But those would be more of the special case, and then the longer term ones would just more naturally work with what we've already built.
Gotcha. And Mickey, don't worry, I promise this is the last mechanics question. We're moving on.
All
But
good.
Tim, in your interview with Loco about a week and a half ago, you talked about a significant Celestial gameplay or like gameplay visual rework. How does that rework that we're talking about, that we don't know much about yet, factor into the story of Stormgate? And actually, I guess this is a question for Mickey too, but we'll start with Tim.
Yeah, I could start it and then
Yeah.
Mickey, I'll pass it over to you. So we are absolutely looking at doing a pretty significant overhaul of the Celestial faction. What we have there is a collection of ideas that we're really excited about, but the version that people play was something that came together in a very short amount of dev time for us. And since then, as we've kind of matured since early access with release after release and our understanding of how the game is feeling, we've definitely come away with a big desire to shake up that faction in particular. And so we'll be starting work on that actually pretty soon. That's actually coming up very quickly on our schedule. But we left it a bit towards the back because they don't feature heavily in the campaign, in the early campaign. Originally, they weren't going to be introduced until campaign 2. But actually, part of the community feedback we got is that people were wanting to see Celestials in the campaign. So we found a few missions that we can kind of pull them into. And we've done that through the idea of this special subfaction of the Celestials that I don't want to give spoilers, but this group is here specifically to do certain things on Earth. And so they're a splinter group of the larger Celestial faction. And so as we do the rework for the Versus faction, that will be what we use going forward for the campaigns that feature the Celestials. And what you're seeing in these few missions early in the Vanguard campaign will stay the same. They're not going to change to get the new things. It just reflects the subfaction that's there.
Yeah, and from a story standpoint, I don't anticipate that the reworking will affect, especially the background. We've written at this point, we have a giant lore Bible. I mean, going all the way back, we have a creation mythos. I mean, so we are going all the way back with this thing. And the background of the Celestials is not going to change based on any of the reworking that's being done.
Gotcha. And don't worry, Tim. We're all friends here. You're welcome to spoil as much as you like. It's only gonna go out to the internet. I mean, I'll put a. Don't worry. We'll put a big warning out in front. So yeah, mission 7 is you're gonna anyway.
Yeah, exactly. No, I would be in super hot water if I said anything about this. But also to be perfectly honest, we're just really focused right now on the Vanguard and
Hmm.
Infernal factions. So we still have more changes in store for those actually that are coming up, but the Celestials next in the queue, and so I don't want to spoil anything about it just yet. But it is a significant overhaul that will play out over multiple months. We'll be working at that for quite some time, and I think that people will be really happy with the end result.
Speaking of redesigns, I know we've been talking about narrative a little bit, but we in 04 and in 041 a little bit, we're recording after that happened. We've seen significant changes to how Infernals work. Clearly, not the entire redesign, but part of that redesign. So if you had to put a number to kind of where we are from Infernals 1.0 to Infernals 2.0, like
Ooh,
25%, 50%, like
ooh.
how much of the rework is now in there and needs tuning, and how much are we expecting more rework?
Oh, that's hard. Why do you have to ask me that? Uh, no,
Well,
I don't think that we're to the 1.5 stage
mhm,
yet. I think we still have a good amount of change and iteration and additions to the race up ahead. For example, we are going to be overhauling all of the structures,
mhm.
all of the art for the structures, the functionality of some of them, and maybe even adding another structure. That's all still ahead of us, as well as building out tier three, filling some other unit gaps. At this point, I would say Alan and the art team are actually ahead of the other disciplines with the Infernal rework. So we're kind of like butting up against like how much design capacity and audio capacity and everything else we have to kind of flesh out the art that's been done to bring it in. And so we have a lot that will be landing over the next couple of releases for the Infernal specifically.
Awesome. Well, I'm talking to Alan next week, so I'm excited to see what he has.
Ask them all the hard
I
questions for sure.
will. Yeah. What's your favorite teddy bear, Alan, from the campaign? And why is it the chalk teddy bear? But talking about hard questions, Mickey, I do have a hard one for you. So we know very little about the celestial anything. I mean, like, yeah, we got Metatron and we got these archangels flying around, and was it mission 5, and that's cool. And yeah,
You're
there's some.
giving all the spoilers.
I don't worry. We're gonna record a. Hey guys, this is spoilery. It's all spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, don't watch at the very beginning. But we got a little bit, and there's some references to what I think people have assumed are Celestials in the e-novellas, not confirmed to the best of my knowledge. But of the stuff that we know, because again, we don't know a lot here, of the parts of the Celestial lore and story, what makes you most excited about them as a faction?
So yes, we've barely
Hmm.
scratched the surface with the Celestials, and that's been on purpose and also out of necessity. And we've talked about, how are we going to start to introduce them, and we figured it out. And I think the way that it's being done now in the current set of campaigns is a really good way to go about it, because we really kind of get you immersed in who the Infernals are and how they operate before kind of springing the Celestials on you. So, but as far as what I'm most excited about, there are a couple of things that I think are safe to talk about. One of them is, when we were building this IP, and you're building an RTS game, and you're building races that are at war with each other, and one of the reasons, you have to ask yourself, why are they fighting each other? Why do these different races want to kill each other? What are they fighting over? And one of the things, that we came up with early on was Animus. So it's this life essence that exists in all things, and Infernals consume it. They use it for their magic, so they drain it. Whereas the Celestials consider it sacred. They revere Animus, and so it's completely the opposite. And so when Infernals go to some distant world and start to drain all the Animus from it, the Celestials show up and try to shut them down. So already you have something very important that they're fighting over. But for the Celestials, they believe that the answers to all the questions that we all have, and questions such as where do we come from, what's our purpose, who created us, or how were we created, things like that. They have all those same questions, and they believe that the answers to those questions rest with Animus and where Animus came from. And so that's something, as they're going throughout the universe, they're searchers. They're trying to find the answers to these questions. And part of the reason I love that about them is because, hopefully we can empathize with them. We all have those same questions, and they're trying to find those answers. And then the other thing that I think is kind of exciting is just that we'll find out that, is our kind of, bureaucracy that we have to deal with and things like that. Like they have their own city states, and they have their own governmental issues and everything else that they're dealing with that actually make our issues look pretty small by comparison. And so it's going to be a lot of fun to get into the different groups within the Celestial Armada, and what are their viewpoints, what are their ideologies, how do they clash, and how do they come together on certain topics.
Speaking of questions about where do things come from, to the best of my knowledge, there is no Luminite and there is no Therium on Earth, at least not any periodic table I'm aware of. And this is based on Earth, at least for now. I think you said in the Loca interview we might be going back out of space a little bit later. Where do those resources come from? Why are they not on the periodic table?
This is something that Tim and I have talked about again and again and again, and kind of worked on, and we keep working on. And I don't think we're there yet 100%. So, it's something that we have to figure out, because these resources have to exist on Earth, but they also have to exist on a space station, or all these other planets, or wherever else we might go. And so it's something we've talked about. It's not something that we have completely figured out. Tim?
Yeah, on top of geographically just needing to exist in all these different physical locations, we also need our resources to be something which is necessary for all of the civilizations in the game, right? For the Infernals and the Celestials and the Vanguard. And early on, I was really wanting to make lumber a resource. For example, there's lots of things that I like as a game designer about lumber, mechanically, how it functions, and I had some ideas for how we could work it in, but we kept running up against, well, it's kind of silly for these star-spanning empires or flying space age intergalactic angels to come to Earth to chop down some trees, right? So it just we quickly get boxed in by some of these parameters and have to work within those constraints. What we have now, I'll definitely agree with Mickey. I wouldn't say that's anywhere near final, and I don't. I think it's serviceable for where we're at, but I definitely plan to have us do a 2.0 pass on the resources specifically, and maybe change one or both of them pretty significantly.
Gameplay, name, visuals, all three?
Yeah, all three. Absolutely. It's all fair game. Now, we're not going to change things just to change things to make them different. Nobody's interested in doing some work for a lateral change, but I like to not put constraints on the dev team when we go to do a revisiting of whatever it is, whether it's a faction or resources in this case. We will be looking to see what's better for the player experience, and that could include mechanics changes, art changes, name changes, you name it.
Gotcha. Well, I will say that the British Empire really enjoyed East Coast timber when they, when they started to colonialize everything. So I guess it would make sense. It's Celestials also, they want that East Coast timber. Is all I'm finding out. But going back to this idea of, we don't know a lot. We know a little bit. There's some exciting lore ideas. There are some members of the community. I think Subsorian is a very good example of this, who is just, there's not a question you can ask him about Blizzard RTS games where he's not going to know the answer, and actually probably going to tell you something that you didn't know, and hell, you wrote the thing. So I'm going to ask a question of you both. We'll start with Tim on this one. one tidbit, give me one thing that is going to keep Substorian up at night for like the next month up until we get new campaign missions, or that's not putting a timeline to be clear on when we get new campaign missions. Don't want to make that happen, but that's going to keep him up at night. That's going to send him down a rabbit hole.
Oh man. I thought we had an agreement that all the hard questions we asked of Mickey first,
Okay,
didn't we?
sorry, Mickey. What's going to keep Substorian up at night? There we go. We'll let you think, Tim.
It's like the Far Side with the two bears and the hunter.
Wait.
So actually something that I'm very excited about, and I can kind of tease it at least, is that you know, you're always thinking about who are your villains. And who's the big bad, and why are they doing what they're doing? Why are you fighting them? What is it that they're after? And I can say that, you know, we set up Infernals to be the villains. To a certain extent, Celestials are going to be villains. And then beyond that, there is something else waiting in the wings, something else out there that I think is going to blow people away. And it's part of the mythology that we've built. And the hope is that, you know, this thing goes long enough and we do well enough that we'll be able to get around to that storyline. And it's something I'm very excited about.
Gotcha. Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. Building on what Mickey was saying there, thanks for going first, Mickey. You know, I think that there's a lot of depth to the origins of the factions and why they're doing what they're doing. When Mickey was talking earlier about Celestials revering and wanting to protect and study Animus, and Infernals wanting to consume it and use it for those purposes. Well, there's a big question of why. Why are they behaving in this way, and to what end is it? We very specifically are setting up the Infernals obviously as the adversary to the Vanguard early on, but we definitely wanted to take care to not make the factions be one dimensional, and to make each of the factions be able to have characters within them and sub-factions within them that could align or conflict with each other in different ways. And so you're going to see much more about these things as we go through the Stormgate in the future. The Stormgates themselves were conceived of as a way for us to be able to take the player's journey through different worlds, through different dimensions potentially, and really open up the door to some pretty wild ideas that we're excited by as a dev team. And so, like Mickey said, as we move forward into the campaigns, you were really hoping to tap into that, be able to explore some pretty out there settings, and to be able to start revealing some of those kind of origin story secrets of the universe that we have that we've laid the groundwork for.
Yeah, from your early interviews with like PC Gamer or whatever, I think I got this vibe that the Infernals were running from something as much as they were running to something. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what you're saying, and I'm not gonna let you answer because, you know, that may reveal too much. But I have two more questions for you. First one is another one for Tim here a little bit, because you bring up Stormgates. Is there a plan for Stormgates to play a gameplay functionality in like 1v1? Because that's always something I'm like, oh, okay, this seems like something that could be really cool part of 1v, whatever it turns out to be, but we haven't seen it in the 1v1 maps, gameplay, anything like that just yet.
I would say the emphasis there is on the just yet part.
Oh,
I'm gonna
okay.
be coy a little bit here, but I can neither confirm nor deny. But yes, Stormgates themselves are intended to not just be a narrative device for us,
Okay.
but to actually tie into the gameplay in multiple different ways.
Awesome.
You will be able to interact with some in the campaign later on in the upcoming things, and we definitely have some ideas for working them into the other modes too in interesting ways. So more on that coming up.
Awesome. Very excited to find out about that one. But last question. In the interview you did with Loco a bit ago, you said that post-release, obviously, we got to get these 3 races locked down. We got to campaign everything that's supposed to happen in 1.0. But you all are working towards idealizing, would like to put in more than just kind of a twinkle in your eye, a wink and a nudge type of idea, adding in a fourth faction. Obviously, you're not really working on that just yet. You got to get Celestials redesigned, got to get all the campaign going. but have you started conceptualizing their story, where they're from, things about who they might be? And corollary to that one, is there anything you can share? Any tidbits, morsels that get us excited? Mickey.
A color, a theme?
Oh,
No.
I mean, look, interview a while ago, you gave me yellow, and Celestials do have yellow. So, hey, it worked out. But Mickey.
I don't think there's too much
Okay.
I can say. Yeah, I'm gonna gift wrap that and hand it back over to Tim.
Oh, I see how it is. Thanks. That was supposed to be my meat shield here, Mickey. Come on. Uh, so to be clear, like what you were saying there, we're not actively working on the fourth race. There's nobody making art for them or doing any of that stuff. But Mickey and I have talked for quite a long time about what we would like to do for that, and we've been kind of cultivating some ideas. We actually have left design space and narrative space for that fourth race intentionally, and we're trying to be just very methodical about how we build out the other races so that we don't put ourselves in a corner where we're not able to do that in the future. And so, yeah, I would even go out on a limb and say that we have tried to maybe breadcrumb some signs or some hints of them within the narrative that we've already put out there. So, in the future, as we hopefully are able to develop them and release them, people will be able to look back and see, oh, they actually started sharing some clues about them earlier on.
I gotcha. So maybe some of those things that I think everyone have ascribed to Celestials just because they're the third faction out there that we don't know anything about. Maybe some of those are fourth faction. I don't know. Clearly they're just anime.
Or maybe
Or maybe.
the Chalk Bear wasn't just a charity
Mm.
event.
Druid themed nature race with hearts. Awesome. Thank you. Confirmation. It is, well, I guess bears and cats. It's bear girls and cat girls. I don't know. That's why we have scanners in the game, because they're cats and they go along with the anime cat girls.
There you go.
There we go.
You really should be on our design team. That clicks it together perfectly.
Hey, look, I'm available whenever you want me. But Mickey, Tim, first of all, thank you for spending the time. For those of you watching, you may not have known, we recorded this the first time about a week ago, and the recording didn't work. So they're graciously sitting down for a second time. So Mickey, Tim, thank you so much for doing this again. I really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to see Stormgates in action and additional campaign missions and all of these wonderful things. Thanks so much for taking the time.